Travel Journal of Beaumont Sinclair, July 11th to July 15th, 1876. With the help of Cain Winters and his men, we sealed off all of the cracks in reality in the mines up in the Sierra Magellans, and then accompanied them back to Conrad's claim in the hopes of finding Doctor Hedgebrook and seeing if he could shed any light on this Shadow King for us. Unfortunately, when we reached Conrad's claim, we found Hedgebrook had already left town. Some of the townsfolk informed us that he had headed off to Fort Landy a few days earlier. We stocked up on provisions, planning to head to Fort Landy the next day. Around the campfire, we talked to Cain Winters and his men, and after hearing our story, they decided they wanted to accompany us. They told us how they had formed their own little posse and had been travelling around Brimstone County trying to do good wherever they could. There are quite a few of such posses that pop up all over the county from time to time. Unfortunately, many of them don't last long, but their help is greatly welcomed. So along with Sally Mason, Cain Winters and his men, and of course, our beloved dog Swampy, I suppose Torinobu and I have quite the little travelling posse ourselves. The next morning, we rode out, heading towards Fort Landy. We crossed the bridge over the Cohen River, heading towards the town of Badwater. Passing through the canyons, before we could react, we found ourselves caught up in a series of spider webs. The more we struggled, the more it seemed to attract the void spiders that had made their home there. Thankfully, with a few agile swings of his sword, Torinobu was able to cut himself loose and get the rest of us down. Thanks to those damn spider webs, however, we'd been slowed down and had to set up camp outside of Badwater. That night, we'd just about finished setting up our tents when we turned around, and where there was nothing just a moment ago, we saw a group of spectral figures all staring at us. They looked to have once been miners. Their spirits now stared coldly out at the living through empty sockets. Their sense of hatred towards the living was palpable, and we felt their cold, icy gaze stabbing into us. It was an uncomfortable sight, but we gritted our teeth and got on with it, and soon the spectres disappeared. The next day, we continued our ride towards Fort Landy, and along the way, a number of small holes dotted the land on either side of the road. I guessed that this was a burrow for prairie dogs, and it was a good guess too, as a number of their small furry heads popped up to glare at us as we passed by. But instead of darting away from our mounts, a whole mess of the darn critters swarmed out to meet us. I've never seen prairie dogs so angry or vicious and in such numbers, and the darn things bit us all quite horribly, and so we rode on, leaving them in our dust, until we finally arrived at Fort Landy, hoping to find Doctor Hedgebrook. Arriving at Fort Landy, Beaumont and Torinobu begin asking around about Doctor Hedgebrook's location. It does not take long to discover that he is with the army surgeon in the local doc's office, helping tend the wounded cavalrymen who fight the ongoing battle to keep Brimstone County safe from the horrors of the void. "Hello, officer. We need to speak with Dr. Hedgebrook."
"Yeah, and who might you be?"
"My name's Beaumont Sinclair."
"Well, you ain't wearing no stripes, so I'm not interested. The doc's busy. Go bother someone else."
"Don't they teach you any manners in the army?"
"Look, son, I got injured men come in here all the time. I ain't got no time to be talking to some lily-livered Englishman prancing about looking for a doctor to fix his little tender feet from back east."
"You cheeky, bloody rapscallion."
"Excuse me, sir. If I might interject, my friend and I are here looking for Dr. Hedgebrook, as he may have vital information that will allow—"
"Look, I ain't interested in talking to you neither. What kind of man walks in here wearing a dress and a basket on his head? Both of you, get out of here right now, before I have my soldiers throw you out."
"What's all this racket out here? I'm trying to work."
"Ah, Dr. Hedgebrook. It's me, Beaumont Sinclair."
"I remember you, sonny. How were your trip to Jargono?"
"It was pretty bloody awful, to be honest with you, but we managed to lift that curse, and now we've got bigger things to deal with."
"I thought I told you to get. The doc's busy, didn't you hear him?"
Now, just wait a minute, Sergeant. You do know these are the two boys that saved Seraphine from the heretic preacher not so long ago?
"That were these two dandies?"
"Yes, it bloody well was."
Well, You boys have been making quite a name for yourselves. Word spread across half the county about how you drove the heretic preacher out of Seraphin. Not many folks have been able to do anything like that. Let them through, Sergeant. I'll speak with them.
Yeah, all right. Go on through. And thank you for saving the people of Seraphin, I suppose. Saved me and my men the job of having to do it.
So, what brings you two here to see me?
We're trying to track down a young girl who was kidnapped from Seraphin after our battle with the heretic preacher. We don't have much to go on, other than somebody calling themselves the Shadow King may be responsible. We were hoping you might know something about it.
The Shadow King. That sounds familiar. Let me just take a look in one of my journals here. Yes, the Shadow King. Or more precisely, the last of the Shadow Kings, I think is who you are referring to. There's not a whole lot known about him. But what we have learned is he is a demon from one of the many other worlds the Void Gates lead to.
Of course he is. Bloody marvellous.
It says here he is from the fiery world of ash and magma, known to many as the Caverns of Cinder.
Well, that sounds like a charming place.
Oh yes, charming, if you like the idea of walking around inside a volcano. It's a bloody dangerous place, boys. Far more dangerous than Jargono.
That does not matter to us. We must save this girl, if at all possible. Isn't that right, Beaumont-san?
Yes, I suppose.
Well, if you're planning to go there, there's a stable void gate that leads there at Mount La Pointe. You must be careful, though. The Shadow King is a creature of magic and sorcery. I don't know if regular weapons will even hurt him. I'd make sure you stock up on dark stone bullets. I'd wager that'll hurt him if anything will.
Well, with any luck, we won't have to fight this thing. Hopefully, we'll just be able to find Lucy Hancock, rescue her, and then get the bloody hell out of the horrible place.
Well, I hope so, boys, for your sake. Now then, Mr. Torinobu, did you manage to get me a sample of the swamp slime from Jargono?
I did indeed, Hedgebrook-san.
Swamp slime? What's all this about?
Before we went to Jargono, Hedgebrook-san asked me if I could get him some of the swamp slime as a sample to study. Here it is, Doctor.
You've been carrying that around with you this whole time?
Yes, I suspected our paths would cross with Hedgebrook again one day.
If it's not too much trouble, perhaps you could get a sample of some of the rock from Cinder for me. I'd quite like to study that too.
Of course, Hedgebrook-san. I will do my best to bring you a sample.
Right, okay, I think we've got everything we need to know. Come on, Torinobu, let's get out of here and get this whole thing done with. After stocking up on supplies and spending the night in the hotel, Beaumont, Torinobu, and the rest of the posse head out from Fort Landy, ready to make their way through the mountain range to Mount La Pointe. Travel Journal of Beaumont Sinclair, July 16th to July 20th, 1876. We set out from Fort Landy, armed with the knowledge given to us by Doctor Hedgebrook. Unfortunately, it seems our passage to this realm of cinder is located in the old mines at Mount La Pointe, high up in the mountain range. It's going to be a tough journey, but between us, I'm sure we'll get there. When we passed into the forests on the way to the mountains, we found puffs of little clouds were released from the tops of iridescent mushrooms, their pungence clogging our lungs and clotting our minds with hallucinations. The visions we endured were quite disturbing, but fortunately we were able to set up camp for the night, and after a good night's sleep, we all felt a good deal better and continued on our journey. As we neared the base of the mountain on the second day of our journey, we passed by a stream and found a group of singing churchgoers were on their way to the river for some baptisms. They invited us to walk with them and join them in their worship. As we knew we would soon be coming up against demons and all sorts of unholy creatures, I don't mind saying I accepted their offer of baptism. After all, it'll do no harm to ask God for his help, and who knows, maybe he'll give it to us. The climb up the mountainside was brutal. and it took us 2 full days of climbing to reach the peak. When we made camp halfway up, I once again had the nightmare of Lucy Hancock. This time she was fading away, as if her very soul was disappearing. What's more troubling is when discussing it over breakfast, it seemed we had all had the same nightmare, Mr. Winters and his henchmen included. I do wonder if Swampy could talk. Perhaps he would tell us he had also had the dream. The next day we pressed on with the climb and reached the plateau near the top of Mount La Pointe by early evening. From where we stood, we should have had a fantastic view of the most beautiful sunset. However, instead of a sunset, we were met with the most grim of omens, as instead of setting, the sun was eclipsed and cast us into darkness. I can't help but feel that perhaps it is a sign of things to come. I don't think any of us will sleep particularly well tonight, but tomorrow morning we will reach the La Pointe mine, and we can finally get this business over and done with. Beaumont, Torinobu, along with Sally Mason, Kane Winters, and his henchmen, finally arrive at Mount La Pointe. High up in the mountains, the wind snatches their breath, and the cold air urges them inside. Well, I suppose we should bloody well get on with it, shouldn't we? Says Beaumont, wasting no time crossing the threshold into the dark maw of the mine. The light of the old lantern splashes around a summoning chamber. A runic summoning circle is marked out on the floor, surrounded by burning candles. Someone has been dabbling in some very dark stuff. Hopefully, they don't succeed in doing whatever it was they were trying to do. I'll bet it was those damned Crimson Hand again, says Beaumont. Oh, I'm gonna get them, says Sally Mason, shaking with anger. The summoning circle is marked out with several candles, and Beaumont kicks one of them over, quickly realizing this could be a huge mistake. However, he gets lucky, as the other candles gutter out, and the darkness within Mount La Pointe seems to recede. Torinobu follows Beaumont into the summoning chamber.
There is much evil here, he says. We must find our way to Cinder, Beaumont-san. Let us go, quickly.
The impetuous Sally Mason runs ahead of both men, with no regard for the danger that may be in this room. Swampy rushes in, joining her, barking angrily at the evil magic circle marked out on the ground. Kane Winters and his 2 men follow along behind. Beaumont continues to press forward. Turning a corner, he comes face to face with a hideously deformed and mutilated man. He clutches his arm and wears a terrified and helpless look in his eye. Who the bloody hell's done this to you? Says Beaumont.
It were shadows. It were shadows and dust,
mutters the man, incomprehensible. Beaumont takes a bandage from his side satchel and wraps the man's wounds as best as he can.
Thank you, sir.
The man stumbles off towards the mine entrance, and Beaumont can only hope that he makes it back to safety. Then he continues on through the summoning chamber and finds himself entering a blocked rail with a collapsed tunnel. Torinobu catches up to him and is soon followed by the rest of the travelling posse. It seems the summoning circle had done whatever vicious magic it was intended for, and has ripped open a void gate leading directly into the ashen world of cinder in this room. Well, I suppose that's where we're headed, says Beaumont.
Yes, this gate will no doubt lead to Cinder, just as Doctor Hedgebrook told us.
I suppose we best dress for hot weather then, eh? Beaumont says, looking around the room and seeing a dead outlaw sitting on the floor, propped against the far wall. In one hand, he holds a tattered satchel, in the other, a six-shooter aimed into the room. A twisted smile stretches across his decayed skull. "I wonder what this chap was doing here," says Beaumont. "Well, let's find out," says Sally Mason, and she grabs the satchel from the skeleton's hand. "Looks like he came here looking for Darkstone," she says, tossing the satchel to Beaumont. He looks inside and sees it is filled with Darkstone shards and a few dollar bills. He pulls out a chunk of the black rock, and then, suddenly, the sound of ribbits is deafening, as a plague of frogs leap from the satchel in a tidal wave of slimy jumping madness, getting everywhere and into everything before they swarm past. "Oi! Get out of there, you little bugger! Chotomate! Abaka! What the damn hell is going on here?" Amidst the confusion, the swarm of frogs get into everyone's pockets and satchels, sending bottles of tonic crashing to the floor and ruining bandages with their putrid slime, before hopping off into the darkness of the mines, ribbiting in what seems like mocking laughter. "Well, I've never seen anything so bloody ridiculous in my whole life," Beaumont says.
Yes, that was quite the unusual situation. Let us keep moving. We must reach a cinder,
says Torinobu, and is the first one to step through the portal, as Beaumont continues to clean frog slime from himself. Sally Mason eagerly follows Torinobu, and Swampy wastes no time going along with the young girl and the samurai into the world of ash. Kane Winters and his men catch up to Beaumont.
"You just about cleaned yourself off there, partner?" says Kane.
Yes. It was a bloody expensive coat."
"Don't worry yourself. I'm sure we can find plenty of treasure in this world of cinder. Be able to buy yourself 10 coats.
"Well, I can hope so. Let's get moving." Beaumont takes a deep breath and steps through, followed by Kane Winters and his men.